30 piercing words opened my world that night, clawing straight into my chest. Grandma, please don't hang up. I'm at the police station. They think I hurt him. They're locking me in like I'm dangerous. For a moment I couldn't breathe. It was 2:47 in the morning when my phone shrilled across the darkness, slicing through my sleep with the unmistakable pitch of something very, very wrong. Women my age don't get late-night calls unless life has decided to rip something apart, and this one carried the tremor of fear that sinks straight to the bone. Leo? I whispered, fumbling for the lamp, the sheets tangled around my legs like restraints. The grain of his 16-year-old voice hit me instantly, that trembling blend of shame and terror only a child trying to sound older can muster. Grandma Nora. I didn't know who else to call. I swear I didn't touch him. I sat up so fast my ribs ached. My hands shook as I tried to steady the phone against my ear. Where are you, sweetheart? Tell me exactly. Riverton Police Department, he said, breathless. Evan threw me out again, and when I tried to grab my backpack, he slipped, and now he's telling them I attacked him. They're believing everything he says because he works with them. Please, please come. The name Evan made my stomach clench. My late son's former partner of barely 3 months, an ex-park ranger who strutted like he owned every room he entered. I had never trusted his brand of polished charm, the kind that tried too hard, smiled too wide, and always came with a shadow. Leo's hesitant comments over the past weeks had painted a picture of a man who used intimidation the way some men used conversation. A man who enjoyed power far more than he respected it. Don't say a word to anyone else, I ordered, already swinging my legs out of bed and reaching for the suit hanging prepared in my closet. A habit from my years as a federal judge, I always kept one outfit pressed and ready for emergencies. I'll be there in an hour and a half. If they try to question you, you tell them you're waiting for your legal advocate. Understand? His exhale cracked. Yes, please hurry. By the time the call ended, a cold, controlled fury had taken the place of panic. I had spent 3 decades on the bench protecting people from exactly this kind of abuse, those who believed authority gave them the right to twist reality, to silence the vulnerable, to weaponize fear. But now that someone I loved more than life itself stood on the receiving end, the stakes felt nauseatingly personal. The highway was empty as I sped through the night, my headlights carving narrow tunnels through the fog. The silence inside the car throbbed with old memories, my son, Oliver, laughing, the way he'd hold Leo high above his shoulders, the way he'd promised he would always keep him safe. But 7 years ago, fate had stolen Oliver from both of us, and I had sworn I would never let the world take anything else from my grandson. Riverton's police station rose like a rectangular slab of concrete against the early morning sky, its fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the parking lot. I took one steadying breath, squared my shoulders, and walked inside. The desk officer barely glanced up until he heard my voice, clipped and firm. I'm here for Leonardo Hayes. Bring me to him. He blinked in that uncomfortable way men do when they're unsure whether they should obey instinct or authority. Are you his guardian? I am the only person in this building qualified to protect his rights, I said evenly, letting a fraction of my old courtroom tone leak into the air. And you are currently delaying lawful access. Another officer stepped through a side door, mid-30s, confident in the way only someone used to being obeyed can be. Ms. Hayes, I'm Officer Denton. Your grandson is being held on suspicion of domestic assault against, that is Judge Hayes to you, I corrected quietly. Retired, yes. But still fully capable of recognizing when a department is mishandling a juvenile case. The blood drained from his face so quickly it was almost comical. His spine straightened, his grip on the clipboard shifted, and his tone dropped several degrees into respect. Ma'am. I didn't realize. They never do, I murmured. Now take me to him. He led me down a corridor lined with dull gray walls and buzzing lights, talking too quickly, filling the air with unnecessary explanations about procedure, paperwork, intake protocols, all irrelevant noise. I let him ramble. I needed clarity. Focus. Strategy. When we reached the juvenile holding room, I saw my grandson through the small rectangular window, shoulders hunched, hands clasped, eyes aimed at the floor like he was trying not to fall apart. There was a faint red mark on his cheek that made something deep inside me snapped. I pushed the door open. "Grandma," he whispered the moment he saw me, standing so abruptly the chair scraped the floor. His voice cracked around the word in a way that shredded what remained of my composure. I reached him in 2 steps and wrapped him in my arms. "Are you hurt?" I asked, pulling back only enough to see his face. The bruise was real. So was the fear in his eyes. "Tell me what happened. From the beginning." He swallowed hard. "Evan got mad when he found out I called you last night. He grabbed my phone and saw recordings I'd been keeping. He lifted trembling fingers to his cheek. Then he hit me. When I tried to leave, he tripped, fell into the doorframe, and started yelling that I attacked him." I closed my eyes briefly, gathering every ounce of restraint I possessed. "And the officers believed him?" He nodded. "They're his friends." "Of course they were." A knock on the door interrupted us. Officer Denton poked his head in, suddenly very aware that every action he took might become evidence. "Judge Hayes. Captain Lorne would like to speak with you." "After I speak privately with my grandson," I replied without looking away from Leo. "And after a medic documents the injury on his face." Denton swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." I turned back to Leo, taking his hands gently. "You're safe now. I promise you, no one will twist this story any further. Not while I'm here." Something fragile flickered in his eyes, trust mixed with exhaustion. "I knew you'd come." And in that moment, every mile I'd driven through the dark felt like destiny rather than duty. What Evan had done wasn't just cruelty, it was an assault on truth itself. And he was about to learn exactly how dangerous that mistake would become. The moment Officer Denton retreated, closing the door behind him with a stiff sort of caution, I let myself study Leo carefully, taking in every detail the harsh fluorescent lights exposed. His bruise had darkened around the edges, a purplish ring blooming beneath the surface like a warning flare. His jaw trembled slightly, though he fought to keep it still, and something in that quiet struggle ignited a fierce determination inside me. I had spent decades defending truth inside courtrooms, but this time the battle lived in the eyes of the boy who had once held my hand crossing playgrounds, the boy who trusted me enough to call when the world snapped against him. "Start from the moment yesterday evening felt wrong," I said gently, sitting opposite him so he wouldn't feel interrogated. "Walk me through everything." He inhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the table as if grounding himself. "It started when Mom left for her night shift," he said, voice low. Evan watched her drive away, then turned to me like I'd done something unforgivable just by existing. He kept saying I was disrespecting him because I was texting friends, because I wanted to call you, because I wasn't grateful enough. He always finds something to control. That word, control, clamped around my heart like a vice. I had heard it in too many testimonies, seen it twisted into too many false narratives by men who weaponized dominance. When he grabbed my phone, Leo continued, I pulled away, and that made him furious. He saw the app where I keep the recordings. All the stuff I saved just in case anyone ever believed me. His voice cracked, embarrassment and fear blending together. I wasn't trying to spy on him. I needed proof someday. You were protecting yourself, I said firmly. There is nothing shameful about guarding your truth. His eyes softened at that, the faintest spark of relief passing through. When he realized I had the recordings, he threw my backpack outside, Leo said. Told me to get out, said I didn't deserve a place in the house unless I followed every rule he made. Rules. Always rules. Abusers hide behind structure the way cowards hide behind uniforms. I told him I had nowhere to go, Leo whispered. That's when he hit me. Hard. Then he shoved me toward the doorway, but he slipped on the rug and slammed into the frame. And he screamed like I had thrown him. His throat tightened. When the officers came, they didn't even look at me. They called him brother, asked if he needed anything, told me to sit down like I was trash. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. I kept my voice measured so he wouldn't absorb my rage. They will answer for that. But will anyone actually listen to me? He asked, eyes glossy with the kind of fear that doesn't disappear overnight. I'm just a kid. He's one of them. You are my grandson, I replied with absolute certainty. And I built an entire career listening to voices like yours, voices others tried to silence. Today, your truth is safe. Tomorrow, it becomes evidence. Something steadied in him then, a small shift of posture that told me the ground beneath him didn't feel as unstable. We were interrupted by a knock, followed by a woman in medical scrubs stepping in with a clipboard tucked beneath her arm. I recognized the clinical efficiency immediately. Nurses always carried themselves with a specific blend of weariness and resilience. I'm here to check on the minor, she said carefully, glancing between us like she already sensed the tension. Proceed, I instructed, keeping my tone cordial but firm. Leo sat still as she gently examined his cheek, documented the discoloration, took notes, and asked neutral questions. Her demeanor grew increasingly tight, her mouth thinning at the sight of the injury. When she finished, she handed me a brief summary. This will go into the medical report. It's consistent with an open-handed strike delivered with force. I thanked her quietly. That one phrase alone would dismantle half of Evan's fabricated narrative. Once she left, Officer Denton returned, more composed now, though his eyes remained wary. Judge Hayes, he began, Captain Lauren is ready to meet with you. We'll be transferring your grandson shortly. I rose, smoothing my suit jacket, the familiar weight of authority settling across my shoulders. Leo walks beside me, I said, leaving no room for negotiation. Denton nodded quickly and escorted us through the corridor, where several officers paused mid-step, whispers stirring at the edges of our passage. Recognition travels fast when accountability enters the building. Captain Lauren's office was spacious, lined with framed commendations and photographs showcasing decades of service. She stood as we entered, a tall woman with steel-gray hair and an expression that balanced professionalism with a hint of unease. Judge Hayes, she said respectfully, extending her hand. Thank you for coming in. I've been briefed on some of the situation. Some? I repeated, lowering myself into the chair opposite her desk. I assume you've heard the fabricated accusation, the absence of witness testimony, the lack of documented injury on the supposed victim, and the visible evidence on the actual child. Her lips pressed together. I have reviewed the initial reports. There are inconsistencies. That is a generous term, I said. What happened tonight is negligence amplified by bias, powered by an individual exploiting your department's loyalty. She exhaled slowly. Judge Hayes, I respect your background and I understand the severity of your concerns. I assure you, we intend to get to the bottom of this. Then start by admitting the truth, I replied. My grandson was wrongfully detained without proper evaluation, and the man accusing him is using your uniform to mask his violence. For a long moment, she said nothing, simply studied Leo, who lingered behind me with quiet bravery. I saw her expression shift, the way seasoned leaders' expressions do when the moral line appears sharper than the procedural one. She finally nodded. You are right, she said quietly. Let's address this correctly. Leo inhaled, relief trembling faintly through him. I reached back, squeezing his hand. You're going home with me, I whispered. His breath shuddered out, as if he hadn't believed safety was possible until that moment. And as Captain Lauren signaled for the paperwork to begin, I felt the first spark of justice returning, not the courtroom kind carved by lawyers and deadlines, but the kind forged by fierce love, truth, and the unwavering vow of a grandmother who refused to surrender her family to fear. Captain Lauren signaled for an assistant to bring in the necessary documents, and while the officer hurried down the hallway, she leaned forward with both elbows on her desk as if bracing herself for truth she suspected would be unpleasant. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Leo, who hovered close to my side, his posture tight but steadier than before. Something about the way she observed him told me she had already begun re-evaluating the night's events through a more honest lens, one unclouded by departmental loyalty. I need to hear his account again, she said gently, directing her attention toward him rather than me. Not for the report. For clarity. Her tone lacked the sharpness I'd heard from her earlier. This time it carried genuine intention. Leo's fingers curled slightly, not in fear but in the delicate caution of someone unsure whether he'd truly be allowed to speak without being dismissed. I rested my hand lightly on his shoulder. "Go on," I whispered. "You're safe." He drew a breath, one deeper than the shallow ones he'd managed before, and began recounting what he had already told me, but now with clearer detail. He described the rising hostility that had become routine in Evan's house, the impossible expectations, the surveillance disguised as concern, the emotional tightening of borders around his life until every movement felt scrutinized. Each word pulled another thread from the tangled fabric of intimidation he had lived beneath. When he reached the part about the slap, he looked down, voice thinning. "I didn't provoke him," he murmured. "I was just trying to breathe without him controlling everything I did." Captain Lauren listened without interruption, her face shifting in slow degrees from attentive neutrality to something far heavier, regret, perhaps, or recognition. When he finished speaking, she sat back silently for a long moment. "Thank you," she finally said. "Your honesty matters. And it is heard." Her acknowledgement had a visible effect on him. His shoulders eased slightly, the tension in his jaw loosening as if someone had finally stopped tightening the screws around his dignity. Before she could continue, the assistant returned with a stack of forms. Lauren took the papers but didn't look away from Leo. "There is something else I need to address," she said carefully. "I reviewed the metadata on the call logs from the officers who responded to Evan's report. They were on scene for under 3 minutes before they detained you." Her gaze hardened. 3 minutes is not enough time to evaluate a domestic accusation, especially one involving a minor. I felt my pulse spike. "Nor is it enough time to assess evidence, examine injuries, or consider bias," I added. This was procedural negligence combined with misplaced loyalty. Lauren lowered her eyes briefly, perhaps in shame or frustration with her department. "I agree," she said simply. "We will be opening an internal review." She turned toward me. "Judge Hayes, with your permission, I would like to interview Leo formally, but not tonight. He needs rest and safety first." "That is wise," I replied, grateful her judgment aligned with mine. "Tonight, he comes home with me." The assistant stepped forward with the release form. I signed it with practiced precision while Leo watched, the faintest glimmer of relief appearing in his eyes. When everything was complete, Lauren stood and extended her hand to him. "I am truly sorry," she said softly. "You deserved better than what happened here." The sincerity in her voice struck him deeply. He nodded, unable to speak, and she stepped back respectfully. As we left her office, the corridors felt different, not hostile or indifferent, but subdued, as though the building itself recognized that a line had been crossed. Officers who had earlier walked tall now stepped aside, their glances uncertain. Whether from guilt or fear of accountability, I couldn't tell. Frankly, it didn't matter. I had no interest in their discomfort. My focus remained entirely on Leo. When we reached the exit, the crisp early morning air hit us like a cleansing shock. The horizon was shifting from deep navy to soft lavender, the promise of dawn stretching its fingers across the sky. I unlocked my car and ushered Leo inside. He sank into the seat with a long exhale, the kind that deflates tension built over hours. Only when I started the engine did he speak. "Grandma, do you think he'll come after us?" His voice trembled, barely audible. "No," I answered with calm certainty I intended to make real. "You are not alone anymore. And men like Evan lose power the moment someone stands up to them." I glanced at him. "I am standing." He nodded, though I could tell the question still lingered in him. Trauma rarely leaves quickly. It clings like smoke. The drive back was quiet except for the soft hum of the tires and the low crackle of the radio, which neither of us had the energy to adjust. At one point he rested his head against the window, the exhaustion finally breaking past adrenaline. I kept my eyes on the road, but my thoughts churned. I replayed every detail he had shared, each warning sign, each incident diluted by false reassurances, each missed opportunity for intervention. Anger pulsed inside me like a second heart. When we reached my home, the porch light I had left on glowed warmly against the dawn. Leo stepped out cautiously, as though afraid the safety might dissolve if he moved too quickly. "This feels like the first time in weeks I can breathe," he whispered. "It is," I replied. "And it won't be the last." Inside, I guided him to the guest room that had always been his refuge, a soft bed, warm blankets, shelves still filled with books he had left behind during previous visits. He stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. "I didn't think I'd ever get back here," he admitted. "You're home," I said gently. "Not temporarily. Not conditionally. You are home." He turned, and in that moment, he looked not 16 but much younger. The age grief had frozen in him after his father's death. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking around the words. "I didn't know anyone would believe me." "I believed you before you spoke," I answered. "Because truth has a sound no liar can imitate." He crawled into bed, exhaustion sweeping over him in a sudden wave. I stayed until his breathing steadied into sleep, then stepped quietly out, closing the door with the care reserved for fragile things. Downstairs, the weight of the night finally settled on me. I sank into a chair, rubbing trembling hands together. Tomorrow would bring complications, legal steps, difficult conversations with his mother, possible retaliation from Evan, but none of that frightened me. What frightened me was the reality that a boy I loved had survived something he should never have faced, but he survived. And I intended to make sure he never had to survive it again. I had barely slipped into the kitchen to make tea when my phone began vibrating against the counter, its insistent buzz slicing through the fragile quiet that had settled over the house. The screen flashed a name I knew would bring complications: Elena, my late son's former partner and Leo's mother. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself, then answered. "Nora? Why is my son not answering?" Her voice burst immediately through the speaker, sharp with panicked accusation. "The neighbors said police cars were outside." "What happened? Where is he?" Her tone carried the crackling edge of someone who had been avoiding truths for too long. I kept mine measured, though irritation pressed behind my ribs. "Leo is safe," I said carefully. "He is sleeping upstairs. There was an incident involving Evan." A beat of silence followed, thick with defensiveness. "An incident?" she repeated. "Evan told me Leo attacked him. He said Leo lost control, that he had to call the police because Leo was becoming unpredictable." I closed my eyes briefly, fighting a rising swell of disbelief. "Elena," I answered slowly, "I saw the bruise on your son's face. I heard his account. I spoke with the police captain. There is nothing unpredictable about a child trying to protect himself from a man who has been controlling and violent." She huffed, a brittle sound. "Evan isn't violent. He's stern, yes, but only because Leo pushes boundaries. A stern man doesn't leave a handprint on a boy's cheek," I said. "A violent man does." She inhaled sharply as though I had struck a nerve. "You always exaggerated," she muttered. "You never liked Evan." "I never had the chance to form an opinion," I replied. "You moved Leo into his house without introducing him to me, without discussing the changes, without considering how difficult that adjustment would be. And now you are defending a man who attacked your son." She went quiet, her silence trembling with dawning uncertainty. "He said Leo was recording him," she whispered finally. "He sounded hurt." "He was hurt," I replied. "By Leo's courage. By the proof of who he is behind closed doors." Another long pause followed. I imagined her pacing, her hospital scrub still wrinkled from her night shift, her mind finally forced to confront the pieces she had ignored in her desperation to rebuild a life after loss. "I'm coming over," she finally said. "I need to see him." "He's asleep," I said. "Let him rest. You can come in a few hours." "No," she insisted, panic overtaking reason. "I need to come now." I knew resistance would only fuel her anxiety, so I agreed. Within the hour, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Elena stood on the porch, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped in a way that told me everything before she spoke a word. She stepped inside wordlessly, her fingers trembling as she clutched her coat tighter around herself. "Where is he?" she asked quietly, no longer hostile. Upstairs. I led her to the guest room. Leo lay curled beneath the blanket, his breathing steady, exhaustion softening the tension that had sat like armor on his small frame. The faint bruise on his cheek looked darker in the morning light. Elena stopped in the doorway, her knees seeming to weaken as she stared at the mark. "Oh God," she whispered, lifting a trembling hand to cover her mouth. "He said Leo hit him. He said Leo was out of control." "And you believed him," I said, not unkindly but honestly, because truth mattered now more than comfort. "Look at your son." Tears spilled down her cheeks, grief mixing with guilt and raw, uncontrollable waves. I thought Evan was helping us rebuild," she cried softly. "I thought he cared about Leo. I didn't think he would ever," she broke off as her voice collapsed. I rested a hand lightly on her arm. "Wanting stability after loss doesn't make you blind, Elena," I said gently. "But ignoring warning signs does. And tonight, you get to stop ignoring them." She nodded silently, her shoulders shaking as she watched Leo sleeping. "I should have listened," she whispered. "He tried to tell me. I kept thinking he was exaggerating because he missed his old life." "He wasn't exaggerating," I replied. "He was surviving." We stepped back into the hallway so he could rest undisturbed. Elena leaned against the wall, pressing both palms to her face. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. "How do I fix this?" "You start by choosing your son over the man who hurt him," I said. "Then you let the truth guide everything else." She swallowed, her throat constricting around the weight of the truth she had avoided. "You want him to stay here, don't you?" "I want him safe," I corrected. "If you can guarantee his safety in your care, I will support that. But as long as you are tied to Evan, I cannot allow Leo to return." She nodded slowly, each movement heavy with consequence. "I need time to think. I can't go back there today." "Stay here," I offered. "There is room." She shook her head. "No. I need space. A hotel. Somewhere quiet. I don't trust myself to make decisions while I'm drowning in guilt." "You're not drowning," I told her quietly. "You're waking up. That is painful, but necessary." She closed her eyes tightly, letting the truth settle. "Tell him," she whispered, "tell him I love him. Even if I don't deserve him right now." "I will," I promised. She left slowly, as though each step required effort. When the door clicked shut, exhaustion washed over me in a heavy wave. I had been many things throughout my life, a judge, a widow, a mother, but now I felt the full weight of being a grandmother asked to rebuild safety from splintered trust. Before I could collapse into my armchair, my phone buzzed again. A message from Captain Lorne. "I have information you need to hear. Call me when available." My pulse jumped. The night wasn't finished with us, not yet. And whatever came next, I knew the storm around Evan was only beginning, and we would need every ounce of strength, truth, and resolve to survive what followed. I did not call Captain Lorne immediately. Instead, I stood quietly in the center of my kitchen, hands pressed flat against the counter, breathing deeply until my heartbeat stopped pounding against my ribs. Leo was still asleep upstairs, and the delicate calm blanketing the house felt too fragile to disturb without certainty. When I finally dialed the captain, my voice was steady. She answered almost instantly, as though she had been waiting for my call. "Judge Hayes," she began, lowering her tone, "there are developments you need to know about. I understand the hour is early, but this cannot wait." My fingers curled gently around the phone. "Tell me." "We began examining previous reports involving Evan," she said. "A pattern is emerging, one I suspect he worked hard to conceal. Several complaints from past girlfriends, none of which resulted in formal charges. The reports were minimized or dismissed by officers who knew him." A cold tightness formed in my chest. "How many complaints?" She hesitated before answering. "Enough to establish a history of coercive control. There are records of doorframe damage consistent with physical altercations, neighbors reporting shouting, and one incident where a teenager from a previous household claimed Evan smashed his phone during an argument over communication with family. My breath stopped. A pattern, I murmured. A very deliberate one. Exactly, she replied. And I have reason to believe he may escalate when he feels cornered. That is why I'm urging caution. Do not underestimate him. I closed my eyes, absorbing the weight of her warning. What does this mean for Leo? It means your instincts were correct, she said. And it means you were right to remove him from that environment. I thanked her and ended the call, but a lingering dread settled across my thoughts like a dense fog. I moved into the living room, sat in my armchair, and waited for my mind to still. When footsteps creaked softly on the stairs, I looked up to see Leo rubbing his eyes, his hair mussed from sleep, a confused heaviness in his features. Morning, he whispered. Or, whatever time it is. You slept for a long while, I replied, giving him a small smile. How do you feel? He shrugged, folding his arms tightly. Like everything that happened wasn't real. But my face still hurts, so I guess it was. He touched the bruise gingerly, his expression tightening. Did Mom call? She did, I answered. She saw you, Leo. She believes you. Relief flickered across his eyes before being overtaken by hesitation. Is she going back to him? No, I said firmly. She is staying at a hotel to think. She needs time, but she is stepping away from him. He nodded slowly, absorbing the answer with more maturity than any child should ever need. I motioned toward the kitchen. Come eat. You need something warm. We sat across from one another at the table while he quietly spooned oatmeal into his mouth. He moved with the wary caution of someone who had learned to survive unpredictability, and that haunted me. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. Grandma, what happens now? I folded my hands together. Now we protect your future. That means speaking with someone who can ensure you stay here until everything stabilizes. I will contact a lawyer I trust. We will make decisions that prioritize your well-being. His eyes widened slightly. You mean, custody stuff? Yes, I answered gently. But only to keep you safe. He looked down into his bowl, voice barely audible. Will Mom be mad? She might feel overwhelmed, I said, but she will not be angry with you. She saw the truth with her own eyes. She wants what is best for you. After a long silence, he whispered, I don't want to go back there. Not even for a day. You won't, I promised. Not while I breathe. Later that afternoon, after Leo retreated upstairs with a book, I called my longtime family attorney, Margaret Blake, a sharp-witted woman who had balanced compassion with strategy for decades. She listened silently as I explained everything, the abuse, the fabricated accusations, the police bias, Elena's collapse into realization. Nora, she said after a long pause, this is exactly the kind of case where swift legal action is essential. We need to establish temporary custody immediately. Elena's cooperation will help. We should also document today's medical findings. Already done, I replied. The police medic filed a report. Good, she said. Now, I recommend filing for temporary guardianship under emergency circumstances. You have cause. Once the paperwork is submitted, Leo will remain with you safely while his mother gains stability. I nodded although she could not see me. Prepare the documents. I'll send everything within the hour, she said. Sign and return it. Then we proceed. After the call, I sat quietly for a moment, letting the magnitude of the day settle around me. I thought of my son, of the man he had been, gentle, honorable, fiercely devoted. He had once told me he hoped Leo would live a life free from the shadows of fear. He deserves joy, Oliver had said. He deserves peace. And here I was, years after Oliver's death, fighting to protect that very promise. The stairs creaked softly again as Leo wandered back down, clutching a worn book against his chest. Grandma, he asked with cautious curiosity. Do you think Dad would be proud of me? For standing up to Evan? The question struck deep, slicing through my carefully held composure. I reached across the table and took his hand. Your father would be proud of your strength, your honesty, your courage, and your heart. None of this is your fault. You stood up for yourself even when the truth was buried under fear. That is bravery. He exhaled shakily, his small fingers tightening around mine. I just want this to be over. It will be, I said. But until then, we take it one careful step at a time. That evening, Elena texted me, her words fragile but sincere. I'm sorry for everything I didn't see. I want to make this right. I need your help. I closed my eyes, relief mingling with sorrow. We were beginning a long journey toward healing, each of us carrying wounds shaped differently but tied to the same fracture. And as night settled over the house, a calm certainty filled me. Whatever battles lay ahead with Evan, whatever legal knots needed unraveling, whatever emotional scars remained, we would face them together. Leo was no longer alone. And neither was Elena. And I, a grandmother forged through grief and resilience, would carry us forward into whatever tomorrow demanded. By the next morning, the house was filled with a quiet steadiness that felt almost unnatural after the emotional turbulence of the day before. Leo sat at the breakfast table sipping cocoa, his posture still cautious but no longer brittle. Outside, a thin veil of mist settled over the neighborhood, blurring the edges of familiar shapes, turning everything into softened outlines. It reminded me of the fragile space we now occupied, one suspended between danger behind us and uncertainty ahead. As I prepared toast, my phone chimed with a message from Attorney Blake. Documents ready. Please review. The legal process had begun, and although I knew it was necessary, the weight of it pressed heavily on my chest. I sat beside Leo and opened my laptop, skimming the emergency guardianship petition, each clause carrying a precise purpose, every line echoing the story we wished had never needed to be written. Leo watched me silently, his eyes flicking from the screen to my face as though trying to decipher his future from the tension in my expression. Is it bad? He asked quietly. It's not bad, I said, choosing my words carefully so he wouldn't mistake seriousness for danger. It's protective. It's a plan that keeps you safe while your mother builds a stable life. Stable, he repeated softly, as if testing the sound of a word he no longer trusted. When I finished reviewing the documents, I printed them and placed them gently on the table beside him. These papers mean you stay with me for now. No more uncertainty. No more risk. He stared at them, then nodded. Okay. That one whisper held layers of relief, grief, and acceptance. After breakfast, Leo and I spent the morning in the living room, sorting through the remains of his life before everything fell apart. We placed books back on shelves, folded sweaters into drawers, arranged sketch pads and pencils into neat stacks. Each item returned to its place felt like reclaiming a small piece of the stability he had lost. At one point, he paused with a photo frame in his hand, a picture of him with his father taken at a lake years ago. I miss him every day, he murmured, tracing the outline of Oliver's smile. I know, I replied, moving beside him. But your father lives in you. In your strength. In your will to fight for truth. He swallowed hard, setting the frame carefully on his nightstand as though it were a fragile artifact deserving ceremony. By midday, my doorbell rang. Leo stiffened instantly, shoulders tensing as though expecting danger. I placed a calming hand on his arm before answering. It was Elena, looking exhausted but more resolute than I had ever seen her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, yet they held a sharp clarity that had been absent the day before. Can I come in? She asked. Of course. She stepped inside tentatively, glancing around as if uncertain she belonged here anymore. Leo hovered behind me, not hiding but maintaining a protective distance. Hi, sweetheart, she said, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry for what I didn't see. He didn't speak, but he didn't turn away either, which was its own small victory. We gathered around the dining table. Elena clasped her hands tightly, as though holding herself together by sheer force. I talked to a therapist this morning, she began. She helped me understand how easily people like Evan manipulate. How they twist reality until you can't recognize the truth anymore. Her voice cracked. I believed him because I needed to believe someone wanted us. After losing Oliver, everything felt like it was slipping away. I reached across the table and touched her hand. Grief weakens walls, I said gently. But it doesn't make you a bad mother. She shook her head. I let him hurt my son. I let him isolate me. I ignored every warning. And now, I replied, you are choosing differently. That matters more than the mistakes. Leo leaned slightly closer, listening, his guarded expression loosening by degrees. Elena exhaled shakily. I'm willing to sign whatever is needed to give Leo stability. Even if that means stepping back while I rebuild everything I lost. Her words were sincere, and for the first time, she sounded like the woman I remembered, capable, nurturing, full of resolve rather than fear. I nodded. We will handle this together. Slowly and carefully. Leo's eyes softened. Mom, he whispered, I don't want you to disappear. I just need to feel safe. She covered her mouth as tears spilled again. I can do that, she said. I want to do that. We spent the afternoon reviewing school options. Leo mentioned returning to his old academy with a mixture of apprehension and hope. I liked it there, he said. I felt like myself. Evan hated that. That settles it, I replied. We'll make sure your records transfer smoothly. Elena agreed. I'll talk to the registrar too. This time, I won't let anyone push me into decisions without thinking. Later, as Elena left to return to her hotel, Leo approached me quietly. Do you think she means it? He asked. Do you think she'll really stay away from him? I think she is learning to choose herself again, I said. And choosing herself means choosing you too. He nodded, thoughtful. As evening settled in, I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the rooftops, painting the sky in tangerine and rose. Leo joined me, sitting cross-legged beside my chair with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Grandma, he said softly. Do you think Evan will get away with what he did? The question lingered in the cooling air. No, I answered. Men who hide behind authority eventually lose everything once truth rises. The process may be slow, but justice always finds its way. He rested his head against my knee, the simple gesture sending a rush of protectiveness through me. What if he tries to contact Mom again? Then we will act. And we will not hesitate. The night deepened, and the stars appeared one by one. Leo's breathing quieted beside me. For the first time since the chaos began, he looked almost peaceful. And as I wrapped an arm around him, I felt something shift, not just within him but within me. I had become his anchor again, the way I once was when Oliver first brought him home from the hospital, tiny and fragile, swaddled and blinking at the world with new wonder. Now he was older, wounded, and trying to reclaim his sense of safety. And I would walk beside him every step of the way, guiding him through darkness until dawn returned. The next morning arrived with a sharp clarity, the kind of bright summer light that exposes everything whether you are ready for truth or not. When I stepped into the hallway, I noticed Leo already awake, his bedroom door open, the soft rustling of papers echoing faintly. I found him at the dining table sorting through school forms and scholarship brochures with the solemn focus of someone rebuilding the foundation of his life one piece at a time. His brows were drawn together, but his posture held new steadiness, as if each hour spent away from the shadow of Evan restored another lost fragment of himself. Good morning, I said gently, placing a hand on the back of his chair. He looked up with eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. I want to be ready for the counselor meeting, he explained. I want them to know I'm serious. They will see that instantly, I replied. You have a way of showing your strength even when you don't realize it. A faint smile tugged at his lips, fragile but real. Do you think I'll fit in again? After being gone so long? Home has a way of remembering us, I answered. You'll find your place. We reviewed the paperwork together, then packed everything neatly into a folder. Leo tucked it under his arm with quiet pride. Just when we finished, my phone vibrated with a message from Captain Hayes, the officer in charge of Evan's investigation. A development. Need to speak with you. My stomach tightened. Justice often moved in painful increments, and each update carried its own weight. Is it about him? Leo asked, reading the tension in my posture. Possibly, I admitted. But no matter what it is, it won't change your safety. He nodded, though worry flickered across his features like a passing shadow. We agreed to meet Captain Hayes at a nearby cafe, a quiet place where people rarely looked up from their laptops or newspapers. When we arrived, Hayes was already seated in a corner booth, her expression serious in the way seasoned officers carried truth. Judge Whitmore, she greeted, then turned to Leo with a softer tone. Good to see you. Leo offered a polite nod, but remained close to my side. Hayes wasted no time. We searched through Evan's prior assignments and discovered 2 additional complaints from former partners. Both dismissed prematurely. Patterns like these don't happen by accident. Her voice held controlled anger, the kind law enforcement officers learn to bury beneath professionalism. I felt Leo tense beside me, his breath hitched slightly. Are they safe? He asked, surprising both of us with the quiet strength in his voice. They are now, Hayes said. And your recordings are giving them courage to come forward. You didn't just help yourself, Leo. You helped others. Emotion shimmered behind his eyes. I didn't think anyone would believe me. We believe you, Hayes said firmly. The truth has a stubborn way of surviving. When Hayes left, Leo sank back into the booth, staring at the wooden grain beneath his fingertips. I don't want him to hurt anyone else, he whispered. He won't, I replied. But healing takes more than stopping the harm. It requires rebuilding what was damaged inside you. He looked at me then, his expression open in a way that reminded me painfully of his father at the same age. Will that ever happen? Yes, I promised. Because you're not doing it alone. After lunch, we returned home to find Elena waiting on the porch, her shoulders squared with determination rather than fear. She held a small box in her hands. When she saw Leo, she lifted it with a hesitant smile. These were tucked away in the attic. Things from when you were little. I thought you might want them. Leo accepted the box carefully, as though it contained fragile parts of himself he hadn't seen in years. Inside were sketches he drew as a child, ticket stubs from visits to the aquarium, tiny clay figurines he crafted with Oliver during weekends when their little trio seemed unbreakable. I forgot about these, he whispered. Your dad saved everything, Elena said, voice trembling with memory, because he said someday you would want to remember not just the big moments, but all the little ones too. Leo pressed the box to his chest, eyes shining. We sat together on the porch steps while he sifted through the items one by one. Each memory served as a stitch-mending fabric torn by months of fear. Elena watched him quietly before turning to me. I found an apartment closer to my new job, she said. It's small, but it feels safe. And I want you to know, I'm moving forward. I'm not looking back. I touched her hand. That's all I hoped for. She looked toward Leo. And when he's ready, I want him to be part of that new space. But I won't rush him. That's wise, I said. He needs to grow roots again before expanding outward. Later in the evening, Leo approached me with a hesitant expression. Grandma, he asked, voice soft. Do you think Dad would be proud of me? The question pierced straight through every layer of composure I had built over years on the bench. I placed my hands gently on his shoulders. Your father would be proud beyond measure, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Proud of your courage. Proud of your integrity. Proud that even when darkness tried to swallow you, you held on to light. A tear rolled down his cheek, but he didn't look away. Then I'll keep going, he whispered. For him. For us. Night settled over the neighborhood with a warm, velvety quiet. Leo stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the stars, his silhouette softer, less burdened. Something had shifted in him today, a new steadiness, a reclaiming of strength once overshadowed by fear. And as I watched him, a silent vow formed in my heart, one forged from equal parts love and resolve, He would never walk through darkness alone again. 2 days after our conversation with Captain Hayes, the air in my home shifted again, as though the house itself sensed that a new chapter was preparing to unfold. The sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows in warm ribbons that danced across the tile floor, and for the first time since Leo had arrived, the morning felt almost ordinary. He sat at the counter eating toast, sketching quietly in a small notebook he had rediscovered in the box his mother brought. His pencil moved steadily, the lines confident and purposeful, revealing both the artist he was becoming and the child he used to be. I watched him from the stove, stirring oatmeal, thinking of how resilience sometimes arrives quietly, like a whisper instead of a roar. The doorbell broke the calm. Leo stiffened, but I touched his arm gently. "It's all right," I murmured. "I'm here." When I opened the door, I found Captain Hayes again, though this time her posture carried urgency masked beneath professionalism. "Forgive the unannounced visit," she said, stepping inside when I gestured. "I needed to speak with you both before contacting the district attorney." My heart tightened. Leo appeared in the hall, notebook in hand, cautious but no longer shrinking back the way he once had. Hayes motioned toward the living room, and we sat. She wasted no time. "Evan resurfaced early this morning," she explained. "He showed up at his former station, demanding access to evidence, insisting Leo fabricated everything. When he was denied, he became hostile." Leo's breath caught, and I shifted closer to him. "Did he threaten anyone?" I asked. "Not directly," Hayes replied. "But the level of agitation concerned everyone present. He claimed he intends to set the record straight, which usually signals escalation." A cold stillness settled inside me. "Is he coming here?" Leo whispered. Hayes shook her head. "We believe he's trying to provoke a response from the department first. But we're increasing patrols near your home out of caution." The weight of her words pressed into the room like a storm cloud gathering just beyond the window. Leo rubbed his palms against his knees, grounding himself. "Will they arrest him?" he asked. "If he violates the restraining order or continues interfering with the investigation, absolutely," Hayes said. "But some cases require careful timing to ensure charges hold." Leo nodded slowly, absorbing the complicated dance between justice and process. After Hayes left, Leo retreated to his room, and I sensed his mind racing, stirred by the possibility of danger returning. I followed him after a moment, knocking softly before entering. He sat on the floor, knees pulled tightly to his chest, the edges of his sketchbook curled beneath his fingers. "I thought I was done feeling scared," he whispered. "I thought once he left, I could breathe again." I sat beside him. "Fear doesn't vanish overnight," I said. "It fades in layers, like winter melting into spring. You're allowed to feel shaken. What matters is you're not alone in it." His eyes shimmered but held steady. "I'm tired of being someone's target." "You aren't anymore," I replied. "You're someone's priority." And I meant every word. Later that afternoon, Elena arrived with a burst of nervous energy, holding a set of keys in her hand. "I picked up the lease to my new apartment," she announced, her voice wavering between pride and lingering uncertainty. "It's not perfect, but it's mine. And it's safe." Leo leaned into her hug, and she held him tightly, as though making up for months of lost time. "When you're ready," she told him softly, "I'd like you to help me decorate. We can make it ours, slowly, one room at a time." Leo nodded against her shoulder, his body relaxing incrementally. The three of us spent the next hour reviewing her new space on her phone, swiping through pictures of the tiny living room with warm sunlight, the modest kitchen with white cabinets, and a bedroom overlooking a courtyard filled with blooming hydrangeas. "It feels peaceful," I said. "That matters more than size." Elena smiled, the kind of smile built from small victories rather than grand triumphs. "I'm learning that," she replied. When she left, the evening drifted in with the gentle hum of cicadas outside the window. Leo and I prepared dinner together, chopping vegetables and mixing sauces in a choreography that felt familiar and comforting. Halfway through cooking, he looked up. "Grandma?" "Yes?" "Do you think this will ever feel normal again?" Not like we're waiting for the next bad thing? Yes, I answered without hesitation. Normal doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means building a life strong enough that the past can no longer break it. He considered this, then nodded. I want that. And you will have it, I promised. After dinner, I suggested we take a walk around the neighborhood. The streets glowed with warm lamplight, and families watered gardens or sat on porches talking softly. Leo walked beside me, hands tucked in his sweatshirt pockets, gaze drifting over the gentle hum of suburban life. Halfway down the block, he exhaled a long breath. This feels different, he said. Like my chest isn't so tight. That's healing, I replied. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes, he said, it arrives because someone refuses to give up on you. I squeezed his hand, overwhelmed by quiet gratitude. When we returned home, the answering machine flashed a new message. Leo tensed, but I pressed his hand. We played it. It was the school counselor confirming his meeting for the following week, her voice warm, reassuring, filled with optimism for his return. Leo's shoulders dropped with relief. I want to do well, he said. Not just for myself but because I survived. You did more than survive, I corrected gently. You rose. As night settled across the house, Leo paused at the top of the stairs. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for fighting for me. I felt my throat tighten. Always, I whispered. It's who I am. And as he disappeared into his room, I realized it was true. Not because duty demanded it, but because love had shaped me long before any courtroom ever did. The next week unfolded with a strange mixture of calm and underlying tension, like watching gentle waves while knowing a storm had not fully passed. Leo seemed more grounded each day, but I could still sense the cautious alertness lingering beneath his surface, as if his body remembered danger even when his mind tried to forget. On Monday morning, we headed to his counselor meeting at Brookfield Academy, the sunlight stretching across the road in long golden ribbons. Leo sat beside me in the car, clutching the folder of documents he had organized with meticulous care. He wore a soft blue shirt that brought out the clarity in his eyes, and though he fidgeted with the edge of his sleeve, there was determination in the way he sat upright. You're ready, I told him gently. No one could prepare better than you already have. He exhaled slowly. I just want to feel like I belong again. You never stopped belonging, I said. You simply had your life interrupted. When we arrived at the school, the counselor, Ms. Alameda, greeted us warmly. Her gentle voice and steady demeanor eased some of the tension in Leo's shoulders. She reviewed his records, asked thoughtful questions, and listened with genuine attention as he explained why he wanted to return. You've shown incredible resilience, she told him. Most students would need months to regain academic footing after such upheaval, but you've done the work already. Leo's cheeks flushed with quiet pride. Thank you, he said, his voice soft but steady. We left the meeting with clear steps toward his official re-enrollment, and Leo walked out of the office taller than he had entered, as though reclaiming a piece of himself he had lost long ago. But despite the progress, the unease in the air crept back when my phone buzzed with a message from Captain Hayes as we pulled into our driveway. Need to speak. Call when able. My chest tightened. I didn't want to disrupt Leo's fragile peace, so I waited until he went upstairs to unpack his school materials before calling back. Hayes answered immediately. Judge Whitmore, we have new information, she said, her tone serious. Evan attempted to contact one of the former complainants. She refused to speak to him, but she reported the incident. It's a clear violation of his restrictions. Relief and dread collided inside me. Violation meant he was closer to being stopped, yet also closer to acting rashly. Is he in custody? I asked. Not yet, Hayes replied. We will move soon, but we're coordinating to avoid escalation. After ending the call, I stayed seated at the dining table, hands clasped to stop them from trembling. Fear no longer paralyzed me the way it once had. Instead, it sharpened into fierce focus, the kind that comes from knowing what must be protected at all costs. That evening, Leo found me in the sunroom, staring at the patio lights flickering just beyond the glass. He sat across from me, folding his legs under him. "You're worried," he said quietly. "I can tell." I hesitated only a moment before nodding. "There's movement in the investigation," I explained. "But movement doesn't mean danger. It just means the truth is catching up with him." Leo looked down at his hands. "Part of me wishes I never recorded anything," he whispered. "Part of me wishes I just stayed quiet, stayed invisible." My heart ached at the confession. "Invisible is not who you are," I said. "Your voice saved you. It may have saved others. You chose courage when many adults fail to choose even honesty." "But it's exhausting," he murmured. "Being brave all the time." "Then don't be brave all the time," I said. "Just be brave when it matters. The rest of the time, let yourself breathe." To break the heaviness, I suggested we paint the small wooden bench on the back porch, something Leo and I had talked about for weeks. We carried out brushes, paint cans, and old rags. The summer air was warm, and fireflies glowed across the yard like scattered sparks from a dream. As we painted, Leo's mood lifted, and soon he was adding swirling patterns and abstract shapes with unexpected bursts of color. "You have your father's creativity," I said. "And your own flair." He smiled, dipping his brush into a bright shade of orange. "I remember painting with him," he said softly. "He always let me choose the colors." "He wanted you to build your world in your own way," I replied. "You're doing that now." Later, as night deepened, we sat on the porch steps with iced lemonade, admiring our haphazard but cheerful artwork. "Do you think Mom will be okay living alone?" he asked. "I do," I answered truthfully. "But healing takes time. She will have days of strength and days of doubt, and that's normal." "She changed a lot," Leo said. "But I think I changed too." "You did," I said. "You grew in ways you shouldn't have had to, but you also grew into someone remarkably resilient." He leaned against my shoulder in quiet gratitude. Just then, the sound of a car slowing on our street drifted through the still night. Leo stiffened. I placed my arm around him. But the car turned at the next stop sign, disappearing into the dark. Once it passed, Leo exhaled shakily. "I hate that I still react like that." "Your body remembers danger even when danger is gone," I said. "In time, those instincts will soften." He nodded, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Before bed, he paused at my study door. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "When this is all over," he whispered, "I want to feel like myself again." I crossed the room, cupping his face gently. "You are already becoming yourself again," I said. "Piece by piece. Day by day. And I will walk with you every step." When he finally closed his door for the night, I stood in the quiet hall, surrounded by the soft hum of the house I had lived in for decades. This home had seen triumphs and heartbreaks, celebrations, and deep losses, but now it carried a new purpose, sheltering a wounded boy rediscovering his strength. As I turned off the lights, a quiet vow settled deeply within me. No matter what storm approached next, I would remain the steady anchor Leo needed, the barrier between him and the world that had already taken too much. The final stretch of summer unfolded with a gentle steadiness, the kind that settles only after a storm exhausts itself and drifts beyond the horizon. Leo grew stronger each day, not in loud or dramatic ways, but in the subtle shifts that only someone who loves him deeply would notice, the way his shoulders relaxed when walking into a room, the way laughter returned to his voice, the way sleep finally came without jolting awake in fear. I watched these transformations with a mixture of relief and awe. Healing is never linear, but Leo embraced each moment with quiet courage shaped by everything he had survived. One bright morning, as sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, Leo approached me holding a sealed envelope. "It came," he said, breath hitched with anticipation. I recognized the emblem immediately, Brookfield Academy's acceptance confirmation. His hands trembled slightly as he extended it toward me, inviting me into the moment. "Open it," I encouraged. He tore the flap carefully, unfolded the letter, and read it aloud. His voice cracked on the final line, "We are pleased to welcome you back for the upcoming academic year." A smile, genuine, unguarded, radiant, spread across his face. "I'm really going back," he whispered. "I'm finally going back." I pulled him close, heart swelling. "You earned this," I said. "You chose truth, and you chose hope, even when it was terrifying." For a moment he simply held on to me, letting the weight of the past loosen its grip. Later that afternoon, Elena arrived carrying a bag of kitchen utensils for her new apartment. Her steps were lighter, her expression more centered, as though each day she grew further from the shadow Evan had cast over her life. "I met with my therapist again," she said, setting the bag on the table. "We talked about accountability, about reclaiming my voice, and about not letting guilt trap me in the past." "That's progress," I replied. "Real progress." She looked toward Leo, who was placing his acceptance letter into a frame. "Watching him rebuild himself helps me rebuild myself too," she said softly. "It reminds me that it's not too late to choose differently." "It's never too late," I said. "Not for him. Not for you." We spent the afternoon helping her arrange a few more things in her apartment. The space, though modest, glowed with possibility. Leo hung a small painting he made the week before, an abstract swirl of blues and golds, just above her living room shelf. "So you don't forget that colors still exist," he teased gently. She hugged him tightly, tears shimmering but not from sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. "For this. For everything." That evening, after dropping Elena off, Leo and I returned home, both quiet in the comforting way shared between people who no longer need to fill silence with explanations. As the sky turned lavender, we sat on the back porch, sipping iced tea. Fireflies shimmered like shifting constellations. "Do you think Evan will be gone for good?" Leo asked. "Justice is moving," I answered. "Captain Hayes said they expect charges soon. And even if he tries to cause trouble again, we're not the same people we were months ago. We know how to protect ourselves now." Leo nodded thoughtfully. "I used to think strength meant not being afraid," he said. "But now I think strength is being afraid and still choosing to move forward." I smiled, pride warming my chest. "That is real strength," I said. "And you carry it with grace." As night deepened, Leo leaned back against the house, gazing up at the stars. "Grandma? Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think this happened for a reason?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't believe everything painful happens for a reason," I said. "But I believe we can pull meaning from what tried to break us. That's where empowerment begins." He absorbed this quietly, then nodded. "I want to help other kids someday," he said. "Kids who feel stuck, or scared, or unheard." "And you will," I said. "Because your story carries truths people need to hear." Before heading inside, he paused at the door and looked back at me. "Thank you for being the person who didn't walk away." I touched his cheek gently. "Thank you for trusting me enough to hold your truth." Later that night, as I stood in my study reviewing the latest email from Captain Hayes, confirming that Evan had been detained pending formal charges, I felt a deep exhale release inside me, one I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. Justice was finally anchoring itself, not as revenge but as restoration. Yet what struck me most was not the legal victory, but the emotional one. Leo stood taller, Elena stood clearer, and I stood grounded in the knowledge that family, when rooted in truth, survives storms meant to shatter it. And as I closed my laptop, I looked around my quiet house, the same house that had held decades of joy, grief, love, and transformation, and I understood something essential. The real story wasn't about danger, it was about how we rose beyond it. If you've ever endured a moment that tried to break your spirit, remember this truth: your story isn't defined by the person who tried to silence you, but by the strength you found when you refused to stay small. Leo's journey is a reminder that healing begins the moment we choose to believe our own voice again. And if you're standing in your own storm right now, hold tight, dawn always waits on the other side. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your worth, your courage, your resilience, then please subscribe, share, and stay with us for the next chapter of hope.